Goodbye. Hello, Heisman.
20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50, 45. There goes Davis. Oh, my God. Davis is going to run it all the way back. Auburn's going to win the football game.
They give it back now to the 30. They're down to the 20. All the band is out on the field. He's going to go into the end zone.
Four-man Alabama rush. Got him. No, they didn't. Oh, my gracious.
Yep.
How about that?
Well, some teams are trying to play their way in. Some teams are playing for seeding. Other teams are just playing for pride. But it is championship week in college football. And guys, I don't know about y'all, but I always love this week in college on the college football calendar. Not as many games to watch, but they all have really high stakes conference championships on the line. And this year, like I said, even more to play for as we can try to play our way into the playoff, try to get a home game, try to get a first round bye, all kinds of stuff on the line this week in the college football world. Welcome to the Three Technique, a college football podcast at the intersection of the X's and O's and the Jimmies and Joes. I'm Trey Reeves in the captain chair tonight, but I'm joined by the full squad, Mitch Mason and Garrett Turney. Fellas, do y'all share my sentiments? Is this a fun week for you, or does now with the expanded playoff it feel just a little extra and unneeded?
No, I think there's always pride and something on the line for a conference championship. I know and I can understand why there's the argument that the conference championship might be devalued, at least for a certain conference or two, depending on what seed you're playing for. But overall, I love this week. I think we grew up in the era of some fantastic conference championship games, especially as we started this playoff era. Listen, there was a take earlier today that, maybe this Big 12 championship is the most anticipated and the most is on the line. I remember some fantastic Big 12 championship games in the last decade that had playoff implications far greater than this in a narrower field. So I love this weekend. I'll be parked in front of my TV for just as much of it as I can be. And I think we learn a lot about programs and in the direction that they're heading for 2025 based on this week as well.
I was wondering how long it would take for someone to bring up that take today.
Terrible take.
We're
awful take.
2 minutes in, not even 3 minutes in off the top. I love it. Garrett, what are your thoughts heading into this weekend?
I'm almost more excited because of the expanded playoff, and it has a lot to do with what we talked about on the live show Tuesday night, which is, there's a possibility that certain teams could be playing their way out of it, which is a little absurd. And it's bizarre that you would punish teams for making their conference championship game, but it is going to bring the intrigue, right? There's going to be several conference championship games where we're going to look at this and say, well, if this team loses, are they actually out based on their seeding or based on, where the committee decided to put them? And, maybe it doesn't make a whole lot of sense where they decided to put them, but here we are. It'll be really fun to watch some of these results play out and see kind of where all of the chips fall whenever everything's finished, Sunday morning.
We'll break down all the playoff implications for these games, of course, as we get to them. But I want to start by just reminding everybody, make sure you're following us on social media at 3TechPod on Instagram and Twitter. Make sure you're subscribed to the YouTube channel and on your podcast feed of choice so you do not miss a single bit of content this week and throughout the college football playoff, throughout the bowl season. Really exciting time to be a fan of this sport that we all love so much. To make sure that you're locked in and not missing anything that we're putting out there. I also want to thank our title sponsor, Home Field Apparel. Guys, if you missed the Black Friday, Cyber Monday sale, I feel really bad for you because it was awesome. I took care of a lot of personal shopping. I took care of some Christmas shopping. It was great with the 30% off. But if you're not, you can still get 15% off your first order with the code 3TechPod at checkout on homefieldapparel.com. Get you some of the best merch for your school or your favorite t-shirt school throughout the entire country as we go into playoff season, bowl season, basketball season, all that good stuff. Make sure that you are repping your school with the good brand Home Field Apparel. Guys, before we get to games tonight, got a little bit of news to take care of. I wanted to spend a little time talking about the coaching carousel because obviously this time of year, it's a very difficult time to be a head coach, an offensive coordinator, a position coach. There's a lot of moving parts. We had signing day today as well. We'll get to that in just a second, but we already have 7 vacancies filled. They're all G5 jobs. So I won't go through all of them. I'll turn it over to you guys to maybe have a take on your favorite hires so far here in just a little bit, but 13 open positions currently, highlighted by 4 power conference jobs. UCF, after Gus Malzahn resigned to be the offensive coordinator at Florida State. West Virginia fired Neil Brown, so that job's open. Ryan Walters and Mac Brown were fired at Purdue and North Carolina, respectively. And then we have 9 G5 openings as well. So I guess we'll start with the hirings, guys. Anything stand out to you so far? I know there's a lot made about why Kennesaw State made a decision. That seems like a very interesting hire, going with the Jaguars running back coach Jerry Mack. Anything stand out to you guys from this first round of head coaching hires?
I really like Zach Kitley, to FAU. I think he's a fun guy. He's going to bring a lot of energy to that offense. The question will be, can FAU play any defense? The offense has certainly fallen off a cliff. There were a lot of people that were actually surprisingly on the Owls bandwagon this year to take a step forward. I thought they were a little too young, a little too inexperienced, and just hadn't shown that. Kitley had some flaws. I think the offense at Tech was a little inconsistent, very turnover prone at times. But if he can inject a little bit of life down there in Boca Raton, I see no reason why FAU can't take a lot of the overlooked talent from a very talent-rich recruiting area and turn FAU into a championship contender there in the American.
Yeah, I was going to say, I like Casey Keeler heading up to Temple. I like that move. Obviously, Sam Houston had a lot of success making the jump and, what they've been able to do, jumping up a level and finding some success there. So I really like that move. This is kind of the Temple rebuild that a lot of people, talk about with CFB 25 and all that. So I guess he's the guy to step up to the plate and do it in real life. So, we'll hope that works out. Obviously, the Stan Drayton era, not exactly a fantastic era for Temple football. So maybe we'll see something a little bit better under Casey Keeler.
I was really interested by that move by Keeler because he does have things rolling in Huntsville. Obviously, he won a national championship at the FCS level there not too long ago, but he is going back home. He is from Pennsylvania originally, won a national championship at the FCS level at Delaware as well before he was at Sam Houston. So interesting move for him. He's 65 years old. I was kind of surprised that he wanted to make a move at this point in his career, but I do think it's a solid hire for a program builder for Temple, and that's exactly what they need. Someone to bring back that magic that Matt Rule found, over a decade ago now, up there in Philadelphia. We have some interesting coordinator openings as well. I mentioned those open head coaching positions. UCF reportedly reached out to Lincoln Riley this week. I don't know if you guys saw that on Twitter.
Make them say no.
The worst he can say is no, right? And I mean, maybe Lincoln's looking for a change of scenery and looking to get out of the Big Ten. That certainly would.
He likes to dodge the big conferences, so gets to go back home to the Big 12 where he likes it.
I was gonna say it would certainly be on brand for Lincoln Riley to want to get out of a big conference, but yeah, lots to. I won't get into all the rumors there. West Virginia obviously has some native sons that are rumored to be coming back to Morgantown, and Ross and Jimbo Fisher.
Ross Dellinger said Jimbo's not going to West Virginia.
That doesn't surprise me at all. Jimbo is too busy counting his millions on his ranch in Texas. Sure. I don't think he's short of maybe popping up on TV every now and then. I highly doubt we see Jimbo Fisher for quite some time. But yeah, let's go to the coordinator level because there's some interesting news that's popped up. I mentioned Gus Malzahn going to Florida State as the offensive coordinator. Florida State also hired Nebraska defensive coordinator Tony White. I think that's a fantastic hire for the Noles as they look to bounce back from a 2-10 season. Oklahoma, I love the hire of Ben Arbuckle as offensive coordinator. He's done some awesome things at Washington State, even after losing Cam Ward this year. Nebraska made Dana Holgorsen official as an offensive coordinator. We didn't really talk about this, guys, but he took over as an interim OC in mid-November, kind of righted the ship a little bit there. And then we have some firings as well. Michigan fired offensive coordinator Kirk Campbell, and Oklahoma State is cleaning house after a really disappointing 3-9 campaign. They fired both offensive coordinator Casey Dunn and defensive coordinator Brian Brian Nardle. So an interesting, as always, coordinator carousel. I'll just turn it over to you guys on what stands out so far as there's going to be a lot more as bowl games and signing day wrap up, but so far, what stands out to you guys?
I think for me, I think Florida State's done a good job rebounding. Two really nice kind of categorical hires down there in Tallahassee with Malzahn and then Tony White. I believe they got the defensive line coach from Nebraska as well. I don't know if that's been made official. I'm most interested in seeing what Oklahoma State does, to be quite honest. I mean, that program, that was probably the worst. That and Florida State were the two worst coaching jobs in America this year. The two biggest wastes of resources and talent. And Oklahoma State is not playing with a full deck like Florida State is. They don't have the financial backing. They don't have the recruiting pipeline or the talent on the roster to just flip a new leaf like I think the Seminoles can this next year. I don't know if this is the end of Mike Gundy or not, but boy, it feels like it's getting late now in Stillwater. And it feels like everything that Gundy had kind of built up over the last however many years, goodwill and success and just kind of banking all of that away. It really felt like all of that went out the window with this Oklahoma State squad that was quite honestly supposed to pull off some, upsets of Utah or Kansas State and find a way to win a Big 12 championship game.
Here's how far Oklahoma State's fallen off defensively. This is why I'm really interested in the defensive coordinator hire here. Jim Knowles brought them from 112th in total defense his first year, all the way up to 9th in total defense right before he left for Oklahoma State. This is what they finished since Jim Knowles left: 89th, 91st, and 126th. So
Yikes.
It is absolutely imperative that Mike Gundy gets that defensive coordinator hire right.
Yeah, and as someone who's actually talked a fair amount of Oklahoma State football over the last couple of weeks with some family that goes there, it's really interesting where a lot of the fan base, I guess, stands on Gundy. I think a lot of people were anticipating that Gundy was kind of like self-sabotaging and trying to get himself out of there. Apparently there are, rumors of some property sold and, in the area, and he was, supposedly like not really living there anymore or something like that. And then, there were other rumors and there wasn't even rumors, but him talking down on the fan base. And kind of saying like, y'all don't show up, y'all don't support us, y'all don't, throw the money behind it, stuff like that. A lot of people just kind of questioning Gundy there. I think Gundy has had a really difficult time adjusting to the modern game of college football and adjusting to what it means to do NIL and the transfer portal and all of that. He really hasn't done that good of a job in any of those regards. And he's been, frankly, just attitude-wise, he's been kind of hostile towards it. And, I'm curious to see where they go with these coordinator hires and whether or not this is like a continuous sabotaging thing, or if he even has a big enough network of people that would want to come join him with as interesting and, sort of, I guess I keep going back to the word hostile, but just the way that he's kind of handled himself. I wonder who would come back to come work with him and want to take over those jobs and all that. I'm sure he'll find somebody, but just kind of curious about the quality of the coordinators they can hire there. One other note on this, obviously Michigan firing their offensive coordinator. I've got a little bit of connection in there as well with some of the Michigan fan base. Obviously Michigan thrilled to move on from this, need something to go right in the offensive side. And with a new quarterback coming in that you've paid, the king's ransom for at this point, you need to find somebody who can coach them up and do a good job putting them in a position to win, because although you're thrilled that you beat Ohio State this year, 13 points ain't going to do it most years against Ohio State.
Yeah, that's right. And they, like you said, they have a great selling point for their next candidate in Bryce Underwood coming to campus next year. Speaking of Bryce Underwood and all the high school recruits, National Signing Day was today, guys. It was I think this is the first time, just because of how the calendar fell. Y'all correct me if I'm wrong. I can't remember it being on conference championship week. And first of all, like, that just seems completely unfair to coaches that have families and lives outside of football. I know it's really hard to have a life outside of football if you're a college football coach, and I know that they're getting paid millions of dollars, so cry me a river, right? But it seems really unfair to them to have all this stuff happening in the same week. But alas, that is how the calendar fell this year. Currently, Texas holds the top signing class according to the 247 composite. But guys, just as a note on the parity and that's transferred from on the field through the transfer portal to high school recruiting through NIL, it's the lowest top class and the most programs within 30 points of the top spot since 2016. There are 9 programs that are within 30 points of Texas class. A lot of parity there, not just on the field. Rounding out the top 10, we have Alabama, Georgia, Oregon, Ohio State, Auburn, Michigan, LSU, Texas A&M, and Tennessee. Obviously, we'll keep a track on this and have a lot more to say about analyzing recruiting throughout the offseason. Way too many games to talk about right now to go too deep into this, but want to keep you updated on the next generation of players as well. Guys, I'm ready to talk some games. I don't know about you guys.
Let's do it.
All right, let's jump in. We're going to go chronological order this week, doing things a little bit different. Our conference championship coverage is brought to you by Baller Pickleball. Make sure that you are heading into indoor pickleball season, I guess, at this point. It's a little too chilly to play outside, a little too rainy here this week in College Station, Texas, but you can play indoors and you can dominate with your Baller Pickleball gear. Go to BALLRpickleball.com and use the code 3TechPod to get 10% off your entire order. Get ready to dominate those family outings, tournaments, whatever you're getting ready to do this winter on the pickleball court. So let's start on Friday night, guys. Like I said, going chronological order. The first game on the docket is the Conference USA Championship, Western Kentucky at Jacksonville State. The Gamecocks, 5-point home favorite, 6 o'clock Friday on CBSSN. We can go quickly through this one, but they did just play last week. They met in Bowling Green last week. Western Kentucky won 19-17. Not a lot to play for Jacksonville State. They had already locked up the number 1 seed and home field advantage in this game. You guys have a leaning in this one. I'll just turn it over to you.
Yeah, I think Jacksonville State favored by 5 right now. I think I like the Gamecocks here. They can run the ball. That's their bread and butter. Western Kentucky cannot stop anything on the ground this season. And I think especially as teams tend to tighten up in these championship scenarios, I'm going to go with the team that can control the clock a little bit more, be more consistent on that offensive side, maybe shorten the game as well. I'll take Jacksonville State.
I think I'm with you. This is about as tight as I think it can get. Obviously, they just played and lost by 2, but they say home field's worth about 3, so that should be, I guess, win by 1. If I don't really know, or I guess it'd be.
Well, they sat starters last week too,
right? Well, yeah, that's what I'm saying. Is if you're just going off of that, this should be as close as it can get. They also did have some success, despite obviously not putting their best foot forward. But they had a bunch of success. They played a pretty decent game. And so I'm not really worried about them. I think they should win this one. Jacksonville State, I think this is a lot tighter and a lot closer than a lot of people will probably think it is. And it'll definitely be a good one to kind of kick it off on Friday. That'll be a fun one to kind of start everything off.
Yeah, I'm going to go Jacksonville State to cover in this one. Contrary to what last week might make you think if you didn't watch that game, I think there's going to be quite a few points scored. Jacksonville State is 73rd in pass defense. Western Kentucky loves to throw the ball. And Western Kentucky, like you mentioned, Mitch, is 123rd in rush defense, while Jacksonville State loves to run that football in that 2-quarterback system. Yeah, Jacksonville State, I think at home gets it done, wins their first CUSA championship in just their second year at the FBS level. Great job by Rich Rod and what he's done to turn around that program as they move up. 7 o'clock Friday, we have the American Championship. It is Tulane, 5-point road favorites at number 24 Army. Guys, Tulane got caught looking ahead a little bit last week. They were already locked into the championship game against Army. Memphis made them pay on Thanksgiving night with just a blitzkrieg of an offensive performance from the Tigers. My question to this, Memphis got caught looking ahead last week. Is Army going to care enough about a conference championship? Now, that might seem like a dumb question on the surface, but this is Army's first ever year ever in a conference in their entire storied history. And they have Navy next week after the American Championship game. So obviously you want some hardware. Obviously a championship's on the line. You're going to care, but they're going to care as much as they care about the Army-Navy game next week?
I think they'll be motivated to play in this game. What I'm concerned about is when Tulane gets gashed, it's through the air. And Army certainly can throw the ball a little bit more. But Trey, I think as you noted in the run sheet, It's going to be cold. There's going to be a wind chill up there in New York. So I don't know that the passing game is necessarily going to dictate the winner of this. Tulane can stop the run. And while I love Army, I think they've been a ton of fun to watch this year. When we watched Army play athletes that were a better caliber, like Notre Dame, in a rush defense that's been disciplined all year, it was tough sledding for the Black Knights. I think we get some of that, even though it's at home here with Tulane. If Tulane had not lost to Memphis, I think we'd be picking Tulane probably by 2 scores. I'm going to try and eliminate a little bit of that recency bias, and I'll take the Green Wave to roll this weekend.
Yeah, and they're going to roll because Mekhi Hughes is going to be the best player in this game. He's got the most rushing attempts in the conference right now. He's got over 1,300 yards, 17 total touchdowns. Dude's a stud, about as good as they come. I don't know what it is about Tulane just churning out the running backs. It seems like they've had a couple of really good ones the last few years. So let me get with Mekhi Hughes and these boys. They're gonna take care of business. I think they covered the number. I think it's going to be a great night for the Green Wave.
Guys, Army's closest win. First of all, I want to clarify something. I did misspeak. They were in Conference USA for like a decade, but they were never close to a conference championship. So it is the first conference championship they're ever playing for. Army's closest game at home this year was without their quarterback, and when they beat Air Force only 20-3. The next closest game was a 37-14 win over Rice earlier this year. They do really, really well at home, especially in conference play. Give me Army to cover this 5-point spread. Wouldn't be surprised if Tulane wins it outright. They definitely have more firepower, but I think the cold favors Army on the ground, and I think that the boys from New Orleans, Louisiana might be a little shocked at the temperature. Mitch, you mentioned that I put in the run sheet. It's going to be 25 degrees with a wind chill of 14 Friday night at Mitchie Stadium.
Brisk.
Yeah, I'm here for it. That's one of the quirks that I love about these smaller conferences hosting on campus. Sometimes you get situations like this where it's in upstate or it's in New York and it's freezing cold up there in December.
Give it to me. Give me the elements, man. I think we should play all conference championships on campus. I know that'll never happen, but that'd be a ton of fun.
Also, just to be clear, when Trey says that he's here for it, what he means is he's here in the great state of Texas, not up there. He's in he's in his house. He's got the heater.
I'm here to watch it on TV with a heater blasting because it's 55.
Trey is not thinking that he wants to go sit in that weather. And to be clear, neither am I. I'm right there with him. We're Southern guys. We're here for the, once it hits that freezing temperature, we can shut it down. We're fine.
Absolutely. Yeah, like I said, I have the heater on because it's 55 outside. So I will not be in the stadium at Mitchie, but more power to everyone that is the core up there. Fantastic dedication.
And before all of our people from the north want to tease us for that, you guys complain when you get like an 80-degree heat wave in the summer, so give me a break.
That's right. Absolutely correct. All right, let's finish out Friday night. We've got the Mountain West Championship. This is our first one with real stakes, guys. I guess if you squint and the committee just defies all logic, Army's technically ranked, and if they blow out Tulane, maybe it impresses them enough to move up a bunch of spots. But being 4 spots behind number 20 UNLV kind of takes playoff contention out of there. But this game has a ton of stakes, not just a Mountain West Championship, but of course a spot in the playoff on the line, maybe 2 spots in the playoff on the line. I'll explain that in just a second. Number 20 UNLV at number 10 Boise State. This game's played at Albertson Stadium in Boise, Idaho on the Smurf turf. Broncos are 4-point favorites, 7 o'clock Friday on Fox. Boise, of course, came from behind to win 29-24 in Vegas on October 25th. And UNLV was really, really good defensively in that game. They held Boise to their 3rd lowest yardage output all year. They held Ashton Genty pretty much in check, but he did score a touchdown in that one, I believe. And both teams have been really good since that game. UNLV's 4-0 with an average margin of victory of 14.5. Boise is 5-0 with an average margin of victory of 16. So both teams peaking at the right time. Garrett and I already had this discussion on the live show Tuesday night, Mitch, but I want to get your take here. Should Boise State be in regardless, based on the logic of the college football playoff committee ranking them ahead of Alabama and putting them at number 10 and Alabama at number 11?
Yeah, the answer is yes. If you're telling me that teams who are at home cannot be moved up and cannot be preferred because there's not an extra data point, then you can't punish the teams that did earn that ability to get the extra data point. The only way that those teams should be able to move is up. And so for me, the fact that Boise State is currently in above Alabama, you can't suddenly tell me unless they just get blown out 70-0, some unholy result that completely breaks all logic and reason. Then I think you have a discussion. But otherwise, you cannot punish the Broncos according to that logic and say, up, oh, we put you in above Alabama until you went and lost your conference championship game. And now all of a sudden we're going to punish you for that. That makes zero sense. So Boise State absolutely should be in, even with a loss. I think that would have so many folks hopping mad. You talk about the brand bias from the big 3 and 4 letter networks that would not go over well in the boardrooms with the stakeholders. And I think that's where you have the potential to see Boise get kicked out if they lose to UNLV, because there's just so much money on it. I've said it week in and week out. Unfortunately, with the way that everything's set up, this is not a BCS formula. This is not an unbiased statistical model. We're dealing with folks in that committee room that have very real dollars and cents on the line based on how many teams in their conference get into the dance. And so I really hope for Boise State's sake that we don't have to have this argument, that we don't have to rue a loss in the conference championship. But transitioning into my pick, I'll tell you, I think UNLV keeps it close. I think this spread is 4 for a reason. UNLV is 10th in rushing defense in the country. And I know they're going on the road, but rushing defense travels. We've seen that time and time again this season. Boise State has the 3rd ranked scoring offense, but so much of that is predicated on Ashton Jonty being able to put up big yards and big points. I think UNLV keeps this close like they did last time. I'll take Boise State to win. Nothing's knocked me off of that preseason projection where I had the Broncos winning this game, but I do think the Rebs cover and make it a very, very entertaining game on a Friday night.
Yeah, Mitch, to one thing that you said at the very beginning of your statement was you said, according to that logic, Mitch, we're not dealing with logical creatures here. We're dealing with the College Football Playoff Committee, and that's not a logic-based profession. That's just a ratings-based and a money-based profession. So I don't think you can hold them to a logical position, even if they have expressed it outwardly. But yeah, I mean, I think you're probably right that this is closer than a lot of people expect it to be. I just kind of think Boise's going to find a way to cover, because I think they realize, not that they have to cover it, I think they know that they're in regardless, but I think there's a piece of them that say, okay, like, we played y'all the first time around, and I think we realized we got lucky to get out of there. We want to make a statement this time around. We want to, help you out. And if for nothing else, I think Ashton Genty is kind of sitting here like, this is my last big moment to kind of prove that I should be the guy holding that trophy at the end of the year. It shouldn't be, the other people. It should be me. I should be the guy that gets to do that. And he gets a chance to, stand alone as the lone guy still left in the race that's even playing this weekend. So I think this is a big moment for him. I think he realizes that. I don't want to say legacy game, because I don't know that that's necessarily where we are here, but I wouldn't be shocked if he has a massive night, a special night, and gets his Heisman moment.
Yeah, that's a great point, Garrett, because he is going to be on national TV on Friday night and have not a standalone audience, but a lot of eyeballs on him while Travis Hunter is sitting at home and not playing in championship week. So the same logic that we use for playoff committee might be used for the Heisman race. I know that the odds are very long for that right now. I'm not ignorant of that, but that's a great point that Ashton Genty is going to want to ball out in this one. Boise State's also a different animal at home, guys. They've struggled a little bit, played some close games. The Hawaii game was close late. Wyoming was way too close for comfort against a bad Cowboys team. Most of those stinkers, though, have been on the road. They did play a close one against Nevada a few weeks ago at the beginning of November, but most of their stinkers have been on the road. I think they're a different animal at home. I'm going to take Boise to cover the spread, 4 points, and clinch that spot in the playoff, and thankfully not make the committee have to make a difficult decision. Don't hear what I'm saying there. I'm not rooting against UNLV per se, but I just really don't want to give the committee more power to leave out, I think, a deserving Boise State team. Their only losses, if they were to lose this one, would be to a ranked UNLV team, which they already beat earlier this year on the road, and the number one team in the country, the Oregon Ducks. And they played Oregon closer than everybody but Ohio State. So I think they have a really good resume. And if it were me in that room, I'd be standing on the table to lead them in no matter what.
I also want to make one more just quick point on Boise State, and I want to give this man his due. Maddox Madsen, I think, deserves a lot of credit. He's been kind of overshadowed this year. Obviously, nobody's really talking about him, but he's very quietly thrown for 21 touchdowns with only 3 picks. He's been extremely good, extremely effective with the football in his hand, and I think that he's done a really good job of leading this team and not making the big mistakes, right? This is, again, you have to remember, this is a guy who Malachi Nelson transfers in, to kind of be the heir apparent and say, like, hey, this is my team, here I go. This guy not only beat him out in, the spring and in the fall and wins the job, but then he goes out there, doesn't make the big mistakes. It would have been really easy to say, well, we got this generational guy at running back. You make a couple mistakes, have a bad game early, we can go to the other guy. And instead, he just holds his job. He leads his team. He takes care of business. This is as much his team with the selflessness he has. I just want to shout him out. I know that, it's weird to say that I want to make sure the quarterback's getting enough praise here. But for Boise State, I just don't think the quarterback's getting quite enough praise for the job that he's done to get this team to this position. This is the 3rd-ranked scoring offense, and it's not all Ashton Jeanty.
That's fair. Yeah, Maddox Madsen has you guys remember my Mountain West preview thoughts this year where I was like, oh my gosh, they lost I can't even remember his name now, the USC transfer, that I was freaking out that he wasn't the starter and it was some kid named Maddox Madsen.
Malachi Nelson, yeah.
Malachi Nelson, thank you.
Yeah.
I couldn't even remember. That's how irrelevant.
He's thrown 17 passes this year for Boise State, if that tells you how irrelevant he's been to their success.
Right. So also one more thing about this game, I think we'll get Gus Johnson calling a game on the Smurf turf because Fox does not have a Saturday game. I was surprised to learn that the Big Ten championship is on CBS this year. So product of 2024, if I've ever seen one. So let's move to Saturday, guys. Speaking of the Saturday games, obviously a lot of your attention will be on the Big 12 championship game in the 11 o'clock slot. And we'll talk about that one in just a second. But if I could persuade you to have a second screen in that 11 o'clock slot, I think that the MAC championship absolutely deserves it. Sure. It's Ohio versus Miami of Ohio in Detroit. A 1.5-point favorite are the Red Hawks of Miami of Ohio. 11 a.m. Saturday on ESPN. Really quickly, guys, y'all have a leaning in this one.
I'll go Ohio for the vibes. I've talked about the job that Tim Albin has done all year long. Trey, you and I did the MAC preview way back in August, and I wondered if that was when the magic started to run out for Tim Albin. We've talked about their story. They lost so many starters after spring ball. It just felt like an absolutely gut-wrenching defeat before the first ball game had even been played. To lose Curtis Rourke and see what he did at Indiana, you would think, oh, well, Ohio would just be left high and dry, and that's not been the case. They've gone 9-3 this year. I'm going to ride with the Bobcats. I think their offense has done quite a bit. Now, I know that Miami of Ohio is one of the top defensive teams. They've certainly taken care of their MAC opponents. They're 18th in passing defense. That certainly poses a challenge for the Bobcats, but I'm going to ride with the Magic one more time in Detroit.
I'm rocking Miami, man. I've been with this team a little bit. I got to write the preview, last season for this team, and it's been a lot of fun to kind of follow them as a casual fan. Guys, Miami has a chance to do some special stuff here. They will have, if they win this game, they will have won 3 of the last 6 MAC titles, which I think is important to note. It's kind of a fun run of dominance there. It would be this one, the previous one, and then they also won it back in 2019. And so that would kind of cement them there. That would also tie them for the most MAC titles won with, I believe it's Northern Illinois, and I think it was, Marshall. That would be the other 2. They would all have 5 at that point. So Miami has a lot at stake here in terms of just the conference and sort of bragging rights. It has not been a special year offensively for the Miami Redhawks, but it has been a very special year defensively. And if we think back to last year, how this game went, they're playing Toledo. They win this game 23-14, and it was 100% on the back of that defense shutting down the Quan Fin and doing what they needed to do to get across the finish line. I think they do it again. I think they're going to find a way to just shut it down, keep this thing low scoring. Give me something like 20-13, 20-10, something like that. Miami's going to get this thing done and cement themselves as one of the top programs in the MAC.
Forgot to mention off the top that these two teams have already played this year. They played at Miami of Ohio, and the Redhawks won 30-20. But since that game, guys, Bobcats have won by final scores of 31-41, 25-17, and 21. It's a lot of momentum for the Bobcats. I'm going to take them to win this one outright. Let's go to the Big 12 championship in Arlington, the next one with massive college football playoff stakes. It's win or you're in. That simple. Lose and your season, other than a bowl game, is over. It's number 16, Iowa State, taking on number 15, Arizona State. The Sun Devils are 2-point favorites. 11 a.m. Saturday on ABC. Guys, on paper, it seems like the Sun Devils' run game should be an absolute nightmare for the Cyclones. But last week in Farmageddon, they held Kansas State to just 144 yards on the ground. Arizona State's won 7 straight games where Sam Leavitt was available. They did lose to Cincinnati, but during that stretch, the last 7 games with Sam Leavitt, he has 18 touchdowns and just 3 interceptions. Rocco Beck, of course, has had a great year in his own right. I'm pumped for this one, guys. And to, shame that take that we talked about off the top just a little bit more, this Big 12 title game is usually always really fun, regardless of the stakes. But now you add a whole bunch of stakes into it. Boy, sign me up. I cannot wait to watch this game on Saturday morning.
So it's funny that earlier in the season, I was the one that was trying to paint the golden light on Iowa State's defense and their rushing defense specifically. Like, yeah, I know they gave up a bunch of yards, but surely they're going to fix it, right? Remember North Dakota going into the Iowa game. It's like, yeah, they gave up 174 yards on the ground, but surely they're going to be fine against the Hawks. That was just a warm-up game. Their rushing totals that they gave up this year, 174, 204, 64 to Arkansas State. Throw that one out. 169, 79 to Baylor, 148, 354 to UCF, 129, 237, 287, 95 to Utah, who can't run the ball or do anything this year, and 144 to Kansas State. The quality of opponent seems to be directly correlated to how many yards on the ground that they give
other
up.
Than UCF, because I think
fair.
they attempted like 11 passes in that game too.
Well, and that was also what that was like right before UCF absolutely fell off the cliff, right?
Yeah.
They were teetering on it. Yeah. Anyway, that being said, Cam Scatterbo, quality back. Arizona State, quality football program. We're going to go forks up. I'm going to take Arizona State to win the Big 12 championship game.
Yeah, I think this is going to be all Arizona State. I think Cam Scatterbo is going to finish this game with over 2,000 total yards for the year. He currently sits at 1,866 in total scrimmage yards. He's going to get probably 150 to 200 yards in this game, and between rushing and catching balls out the backfield, something like that. He's having a fantastic season. 19 touchdowns on the year for Cam Scatterbo. He's an absolute monster. And speaking of quarterbacks not getting enough praise, yeah, Sam Leavitt's been a lot better. He's improving in front of our eyes. He's having kind of quietly a good year in the Big 12. He'll probably be able to take those next steps over the next few years and really become something for Arizona State. But we don't have to talk about this next couple of years. We get to talk about them right now because they're a really, really good football team. I think they're going to be able to run the football for whatever they want to, set up some play action, hit some big shots. Going to be a lot of partying for Arizona State when they come to Arlington. It's going to be a fun weekend for the Sun Devils faithful.
They've got a lot of tools for a team to be a team that could cause a higher seed some problems. A guy like Cam Scatterbo, a really good receiver that's emerged, and Jordan Tyson as the number 1 option for Sam Leavitt. I'm really excited to see what the Sun Devils can do because I think they are going to make it to the college football playoff. Vibes are really high in Ames right now, coming off their first the win in Farmageddon gave them their first 10-win season ever. It's a lot to be said to overcome those vibes for Arizona State, but I was really impressed with how thoroughly the Sun Devils dismantled their rival last week when so much was ahead of them. There's so much pressure on them for the first time in ages, and they live up to the billing and just destroyed their rival on the road. So I think that momentum carries over to Arlington. They get the win.
Kenny Dillingham has stepped up to the plate, and he's been one of the best stories since he moved down from Oregon. And I love the direction that he's headed with that program. I think Matt Campbell is a good coach. I've sung his praises for the past several years. I mean, there was one time where I was very publicly advocating for him to be the head coach of my team. Glad it didn't work out that way, but I do like Kenny Dillingham as the better coach. I think the team that the Sun Devils have is better. I like the coaching matchup for Kenny Dillingham as well. I will say this year in the Big 12, as we've talked about all year, with the conference being wide and not deep, and who's really the front runner, and will someone fill the power vacuum? We thought it was going to be Utah or Arizona or Oklahoma State, and no one really rose to the occasion from that group. The closest that we had expectations to was Iowa State here. They were one of my preseason darlings. I said 9 wins is certainly in the cards. You can squint your way to Arlington, and lo and behold, they found their way to get here. What I'm interested in is, yes, who wins this game and goes to the college football playoff, but mostly what kind of legacy does this set up for 2025 and beyond? A conference that's looking for a rudder, that's looking for a bellwether. These are two rather unlikely programs historically to do that, and yet they've taken the bull by the horns here in year one. I think this sets up the Big 12 to be a fascinating conference, to be God's conference going forward.
And a couple of teams that have a lot of talent coming back next year too. Like that,
Sure.
that is a big thing to look at. I think, yeah, Scadaboo is draft eligible, but I do think that he has a year of eligibility remaining if he wanted to use it. So Sam Levitt obviously will be back. Rocco Becht will be back. So lots to look forward to next year for these teams.
Yeah, and I was going to say, I want to reiterate this from the live show that we talked about, Trey, but the job that Kenny Dillingham has done turning this thing around after the Herm Edwards debacle is just fantastic. I didn't expect them to be competitive for 5 years minimum, and here they are, not only 10-2 in the championship game, but knocking on the door of a college football playoff berth. Could knock off one of these teams. I think there's a couple maybe slightly overrated teams that might be hosting games that, Arizona State could find their way there. They could find their way to a bye if Clemson wins the ACC. There's all sorts of things that could happen that run in their favor right now. This is a massive moment for them in their program. And yeah, for a conference looking for some identity and looking for one of those kind of top teams, why not Arizona State? That's a lot of fun.
You're absolutely right. Let's go over to the SEC. Let's go to Atlanta. We have the Texas Longhorns, number 2, in the latest college football playoff rankings. 2.5-point favorites against the number 5 Georgia Bulldogs. Before we really start breaking this game down, did this line surprise you guys when it came out that Texas was 2.5-point favorites on a neutral field?
Not for me. I think Texas has been building a whole lot of momentum. Yes, they played with their food against Kentucky a little bit.
And
guys,
Arkansas and A&M and
well, and listen, I think I didn't get to be on the live show because I was stuck in traffic, but I think the only thing that's holding Texas back from winning a national championship, quite honestly, is Quinn Ewers. If he can stop with the red zone turnovers, which Texas, for all of their strengths, converting touchdowns in the red zone is not one of them. They've got to tighten that up. But aside from that, they were an insanely complete team to my eyes on the field. And we've seen Georgia just be so up and down as far as, hey, we can move the football one week and then suddenly we have no answers offensively. To me, I just look at the resumes and think, even though Georgia has had the infinitely tougher schedule, I find myself trusting the Longhorns a little bit more week over week. And so this line doesn't necessarily surprise me. It's why I'm going to take the Longhorns minus the points in Atlanta.
I'm going to be a little bit boring here. I'm going to say that Georgia finds a way to win the SEC again, because this is, number one, it's just kind of who they are. They've built it up. This isn't surprising to them. Number two, this is basically a home game. It's almost like a home game on steroids because, they get to play this in their backyard in the biggest city in their state, right? So it's, I know Atlanta's not technically their home city, but it's a massive advantage for them being in Atlanta. And the other thing I want to say is, we saw how this game played out the first time. It wasn't particularly close. It was at Texas. Yes, there were lots and lots of mistakes, but I think we've kind of seen that from Texas is they've made some mistakes in a lot of games this year. They just haven't played a team who's made them pay for them yet, outside of the Georgia Bulldogs. The Georgia Bulldogs took those mistakes, and they took the arm and they put them in the arm bar and they made them tap, right? That's kind of what they ended up doing to Texas the first time around. It's going to be a lot harder to throw trash on the field to overturn a call, so it's going to be maybe a little bit tougher for Texas in this one. Of course, a little bit of a jest there. I just think this is too good of a Georgia team that knows how to win. They played some tough spots. They've been in some absolute dogfights, no pun intended. They shouldn't have been in a dogfight with Georgia Tech, but rivalries get like that sometimes. And for the effort that Haynes King gave in that game, Georgia found a way to overcome it. They are not a complete team. They are not perfect. They're not, by any means, they're not a juggernaut like they have been in the past. But they're good enough, and they have good enough players, and they have a good enough defense, and they have a good enough pass game that I think they're going to find a way to get it done and win this game in Atlanta.
I'm going to take Georgia to win this game as well. Couple reasons here. I don't know how much Texas has to play for in this one. Obviously, and I'd love your guys' thoughts on this. Obviously, they'd love to win the SEC year one. Obviously, they'd love, just from a personal pride standpoint, to erase their one loss this year and avenge that one loss. Obviously, those are great things to play for. If you don't think Kirby Smart is telling his team that they will not be in the college football playoff if they lose this game, you're crazy. He looks for any sort of slight, any sort of motivation that he can. He is 110% telling his team that they will not be in the college football playoff if they lose this game because they lost the SEC championship last year and were left out of the 14 college football playoff. So, right or wrong, obviously they're going to be.
We all agree that's wrong, right? Like
we all agree that's wrong. Yes, but
Kirby Smart doesn't.
Kirby Smart will use whatever he can to motivate his football team and try to turn them into an underdog whenever they can. So that's one thing. I think Georgia feels like they might have to play for a little bit more than Texas. Mitch, I can tell you're really excited to weigh in on that, so I'll let you do that before I finish that point.
Well, I completely agree with you on Georgia. The thing I was going to disagree with is that Texas doesn't have anything to play for. I think if they want to be an elite team, and I think Sarkisian certainly has them moving towards that direction, whether you feel like they are a complete elite team yet or not, there's no way that this Texas team is qualifying this weekend that, we have the playoff to look forward to. And so, this game doesn't matter. I think absolutely the narrative building up to this season was that Texas will not be ready. Texas is going to get shoved in a locker by all of this physicality and speed in the SEC. And they've turned that narrative right around, right? I mean, I had to hear it as I walked out of Kyle Field, the SEC chants ringing to my ears from the Longhorn fans that did travel. It feels like Texas is trying to build towards something special. And whether it's this year or another year down the line, national championship considerations are right around the corner for the Longhorns. So I think they're going to be perfectly ready to play. Now, to say that you're going to take Georgia because Georgia might be extra motivated and what have you, they've got the recent history of being left out. All of that I think is perfectly fine. But if Texas loses, I don't think it's the, we didn't want to be here syndrome.
1,000%. I don't think it's a situation where you have bowl games where a team just obviously doesn't want to show up, right? There's a ton of personal pride to play for if you're the Texas Longhorns. Like I said, you want to avenge your one loss. You want to win the SEC in year one and prove all those naysayers wrong. But I think that Kirby is going to just rack it up that motivation a little bit more this week. And if Georgia gets out to a lead like they did in Austin, I think you could see that play out a little bit more. I think Georgia could keep their foot on the gas pedal a little bit more. And Texas might just a little bit in their minds think, okay, we're going to host a playoff game next in a couple weeks. We're going to just mentally be there for a little bit. And that could be enough for Georgia to hold on for a win or go through. Just want to remind everybody a little bit about the first game, though. It was 30-15 Georgia in Austin. None of the three quarterbacks that played all that well. There were a lot of turnovers. It was really sloppy. It was a defense first game. But Georgia held Texas to their lowest scoring and yardage output since the TCU game in 2022. That was just an ugly 10-7 final on TCU's way to the college football playoff. I don't know that we'll see another just pure defensive slugfest like that, but the reason on the field, you mentioned this a little bit, Mitch. The reason on the field that I'm going to pick Georgia, outside of all the intrinsic stuff, outside of all the motivation stuff, the Kirby rat poison, I'm picking Georgia because I trust Carson Beck right now more than I trust Quinn Ewers. Quinn has not looked good. He could have had A&M completely on the ropes. He could have made A&M lose that game 34-0 if it weren't for his 2 red zone turnovers last week, guys. I know one wasn't completely his fault. It was a tip ball, but the fumble was 100% on him. And Carson Beck, to his credit, since the Ole Miss game, when everybody, including all 3 of us on this show, were just trashing him, making sure that we got our takes out there, that he was very overrated, he has answered that call the last 3 games of the season. He has 313 yards per game, 11 touchdowns, not just any interceptions, no total turnovers in the last 3 games that Georgia's played. Carson Beck is playing a lot better than Quinn Ewers right now. Injury notwithstanding, obviously, with Quinn Ewers, but Carson Beck's just frankly playing better, and I trust him more to win this game on a neutral field, neutral, quote unquote, in Atlanta.
What I do wonder is Pete Kwiatkowski is one of the best at positioning his linebackers and safeties into throwing lanes and confusing the quarterback as to where his eyes need to be looking and where those throws need to actually go. And that's what we saw Carson Beck struggle with all year long, was disguised coverages. The speed of that Texas secondary, even if they're not necessarily fooling Carson Beck, and listen, maybe that's easier than some. It's become quite apparent he doesn't really love football. He says he doesn't watch football at all in his free time.
That was concerning. That kit that came out this week.
Yeah, man.
Not a good look, especially as the NFL draft nears.
Not a good look to say that this guy doesn't just eat, sleep, dream ball. But I am concerned about that. I feel like, not turning it over against Georgia Tech, and I love Georgia Tech. Brent Key, hello, big supporter, is one thing. Not turning it over against the Texas secondary, the top scoring defense in the country, one of the best, the top total passing defense in the country for the Longhorns, that's going to be quite another thing. I will say, give Carson Beck his flowers, and let's start talking about the NFL draft once again if he is able to dissect that Texas defense. I think that's when you start to have that conversation, but I'm going to make him prove it to me first.
I want to ask a quick question on this because I just thought about this. If Texas loses this game, so if they don't show up, Georgia does their thing. If Texas loses this game, they're probably the 5 seed, right? Because they'll drop down. They'll be ahead of Penn State or Oregon, or I guess Oregon could, keep the 5 seed if they lose that one. But
probably 6 because of Notre Dame. I don't see Notre Dame dropping this week.
Okay, so if that's the case, then maybe move. But if you're Texas, you have the opportunity at the 5 seed, like if that was the case and everyone kind of scoots down one because you have to drop out. If that's the case, I almost think that's a better lane for them. Obviously, people talking about wanting the 5 seed. Why would you want to be the 2 seed and go have to rematch Georgia according to this current thing? Or, if Ohio State slides up into that because Georgia loses the championship game or something like that. Why would you want that matchup, even with the first round bye, as opposed to maybe saying, in the current bracket, you're getting Arizona State, then Boise State, then you get to go play Oregon after that in the semifinals. In my opinion, I think Texas might have a better shot losing this game, having to go through an easier path if they do end up in that 5 seed. I don't know if that's, similar opinion or whatever else. Obviously, they want to win this game. Obviously, they want to win the SEC and get there. But obviously, that's true, right? Nobody's saying they don't want to win the game. But I wonder if that's not the better path for them overall, finding their way through the easier part of the bracket.
Certainly an argument. I don't know that. It's impossible to know what they're thinking on the inside. And if you gave Sark truth serum, what he would say. Certainly an argument for that. A lot has been made about that path argument as the auto bids from the Big 12 and the ACC look to be significantly weaker than playing a team that might have lost. But you never know. Maybe there's an Indiana matchup, right, that they're not that scared of. Maybe they're it's impossible to know until the bracket is actually on the paper, and we won't know that till long after these games are played. But hold that thought, because I have some thoughts about that in the Big Ten championship here in a little bit. Guys, let's go really quickly on the Sun Belt here. No offense to the Sun Belt, but it's not really national. It's going to be a fun game. Let me just stop the slander right there. It's going to be a really fun game. Put it as part of your quad box, your tri box here at the night. Maybe find a basketball game to finish out that quad box. But Marshall at Louisiana in Lafayette, the Raging Cajuns 6-point favorites. I've got the Cajuns here. A lot of distractions for Marshall with their head coach not having his contract renewed. That's been a big story this week with him potentially flirting with Southern Miss to maybe leverage that. A lot of distractions for Marshall. I'm going to go with Louisiana, who's been really good at home this year.
Yeah, I don't have a reason to go against the Raging Cajuns. I've been kind of leaning on them as far as our ledger picks these last couple of weeks. I really like Ben Woolridge. I will say, even though it's a top 30 passing offense for the Raging Cajuns, Marshall's sneaky good at defending the pass. So that's certainly a matchup to watch, but I'm going to go with the home team here. I'll take Louisiana.
Yeah, Marshall's been playing a lot better in this back part of the season. It's been a little close for comfort the last couple of weeks, and it's been a lot tighter than I think Marshall probably wants it to be. I'm with you guys. I think it's going to be the Raging Cajuns. They're going to take care of business at home and then kind of finish this season off on the top note. And Trey, you're right. There's a couple too many distractions for me to really trust Marshall in this spot.
Well, let's go to the Big Ten championship game in Indianapolis. It's a surprise matchup, not what we were penciling in for a couple of weeks. It's number 3 Penn State taking on number 1 Oregon. The Ducks are 3.5-point favorites, 7 o'clock Saturday, like I mentioned earlier, on CBS. A little bit weird, but CBS carrying this game. Congrats to Gary Danielson and Brad Nessler getting to call this one. They're finally getting to call a good game, guys. I feel like they really haven't gotten a lot of those this year. Guys, the get-in price to this game is like $12. I was low-key Googling how long it would take to drive to Indianapolis because that's amazing for a top 3 matchup. But I think that communicates just a little bit what the stakes are here. Like we mentioned with the SEC, obviously, some coaches will prefer a bye. This is where you definitely could see if Oregon drops, being the 5 seed and having that preferred path like Garrett was talking about earlier. What I think contradicts that just a little bit is I think these are 2 coaches that are hungry and really want to prove some doubters wrong. Dan Lanning and James Franklin, there's been a lot of big game questions about them over the last couple of years. Obviously, Dan Lanning has done a lot to answer those by beating Ohio State this year. But James Franklin, that's obviously still a big monkey on his back as he goes into this one. I honestly don't have a huge beat on this game. It's going to be interesting to see who's more motivated in this one out of those 2 hungry head coaches. But Oregon's kind of been in cruise control a little bit the last few weeks. Penn State's offense seems to be clicking since that Ohio State debacle. Is it crazy that I lean the Nittany Lions to cover the 3.5-point spread? And I think that Oregon maybe squeaks out a win by a field goal, but it wouldn't surprise me if Penn State plays it really tough or sneaks out a win.
They've got the defense to do that, and I think that's the one thing that keeps me from just smacking Oregon minus the points here. I do think the offense has been more complete this year, and Andy Kotelnicki has gone back to the well. It seems like he's gotten a lot of things cleaned up since they were just absolutely stifled against Oregon State. My lingering question is just, can James Franklin rise to the occasion, right? We've seen down the stretch game management come to the fore. And if this is a close game late, then that puts James Franklin's game management squarely in the crosshairs of deciding whether or not they can pull off a Big Ten championship game or not. Remember, they were not expected to be here. They didn't know until, after the big game that they were even going to Indianapolis. And so it feels like maybe Penn State's playing with house money. Maybe that kind of alleviates some of the pressure. But then again, if you're Penn State, you also kind of wonder, hey, when's the next time that we're going to get there? It's got kind of Texas Ranger 2023 vibes, right? Like, well, we're in the World Series. We might as well win this one. So I am concerned about the line. It's suspiciously low. And so I do think we're in for a good game. I'm going to go wait and see mode again. I'm going to take Oregon minus the points. I'll go with who I believe is the better head coach. I'll go with who I believe is the better complete team. And I'll take the Oregon Ducks. I will happily be proven wrong if Penn State can find a way to cover this. Heck, if they can find a way to win this game, that's what I'm watching for on Saturday night.
Yeah, guys, these are two, fantastic teams. Obviously, you're not in this game if you're not a fantastic team, but these are two. I think this is the matchup that we deserved, if I'm being honest. A lot of people wanted to see Ohio State in this game. This is the matchup I think that we really deserved. We get two pretty evenly matched defenses, neither defense really perfect, but both top 10 in scoring, both very good. The thing that I like in this, though, the Nittany Lions defense attacks the football. They get after the football. I think they got 12 picks on the year. They just go get the ball. When they see it up in the air, it's time to go. It's time to go get that ball. Both teams are extremely good running the football, right? Thinking, on one side, Nick Singleton, Katron Allen. On the other side, Jordan James has been an absolute beast this year for the Ducks. Both offensive lines mauling. And both quarterbacks playing pretty well. Obviously we know Dylan Gabriel's been having a fantastic season. He leads the Big Ten in most statistical categories. But Drew Aller, for all the hatred he got in the offseason and all of the he's not the guy, he's not going to be able to get over the hump. It's a big year for him. Got to prove it. Nobody really came in here thinking he was going to have a great season. And he's been having a pretty good season getting it done. You watch the tape, you turn on the Penn State games, and I had to go back and watch some highlights today just to kind of see what I thought about this game. He just kind of has a winning attitude, right? He just kind of goes, if you need him to pick up the 4 yards to get the first, you see him diving head first for it. He's not a guy that kind of gives himself up, looks for the sidelines that often. He's a real competitor, and I think that that's something we're not going to give him enough credit for. And I'm really, really pumped about this matchup. For me, when I look at this matchup and it's this close, I got to look for a difference maker, right? I got to look for one player who I think can make that play when it comes down to it. When the score is close or the game's tied, it's the fourth quarter, you need to convert. You need to, it's 3rd and 15. Who are you going to go find? For me, it's Tyler Warren. Tyler Warren is such a threat for the Penn State Nittany Lions. He is so talented. He is so just good. He finds his spot. He catches the ball. He comes down to tough contested passes. Tyler Warren's a stud. I'm going to take Penn State to win the game. I think they're going to win. I think they're going to, obviously they'll cover if they get that, but I think they need this. Like both teams need this, kind of like what you're saying, Trey. There's a lot of need to in this game for both coaches, but I think Penn State just feels that deep. Like, okay, we finally got Ohio State out of the way. Yeah, we lost to them, but they kind of blew it this year. So this is our chance. This is our moment. We got to have this. I think everybody in that locker room feels that. And I think they're going to make 1 or 2 more plays down the stretch. This will be one of the best games I think that we're going to see, not just on championship Saturday, but across the whole season. I think it's going to be a really, really fun game. But give me Tyler Warren to come down with the ball that he probably shouldn't come down with to help Penn State put this one across the finish line.
Really interested to see James Franklin in a game that does not involve Ohio State or Michigan, in a big game that does not involve Ohio State or Michigan. He hasn't been able to get those monkeys off his back, but I think this one's either a really close game that comes down to a last-second field goal or a blowout for Oregon. I really don't see a situation where Penn State runs away from this one. I know I teased picking Penn State earlier. I'm going to go with the safe side of the spread, I think, and take Oregon. I think just a more proven team at this point. Played a harder schedule, been winning those games by a wider margin. Penn State's look better, but I'm going to chicken out and take Oregon here at the end. Let's go to the ACC. Last one on the docket, last one chronologically, but first one in our hearts, guys, dare I say, as the SMU Mustangs take on the 8th ranked SMU Mustangs, take on the 17th ranked Clemson Tigers. SMU 2.5-point favorites in Charlotte. The winner is in. Same discussion we had with Boise State. Logically, SMU should be in with a loss if we're valuing people that made their conference championship over people that are sitting at home this week. But y'all know the committee hates logic. So we'll see what happens if SMU were to lose and Clemson were to steal a bid. SMU has won 9 straight games, guys, by an average of 19.9 points, but it's come against not so stellar competition. The average ranking of those 9 teams is 58th in the SP+. It's just one top 25 team in the SP+ in that span. Clemson will be the highest rated team in the SP+ that SMU has faced this year. Clemson, for their mark, hasn't been very good. They've played a tougher schedule, but they haven't been good against their bigger games. They're 0-3 against top 25 SP plus teams. You guys leaning Mustangs or Tigers? The team with a lot of experience playing in this ACC championship game, or the team making it for the first time?
Well, yeah, I think that's the two schools of thought, right? Do you ride with the kind of crusty vet and the experience here, or do you go with the new hot shot? And for me, I'm going to go with SMU. I think they're a more cohesive team, not the more talented team. Heck, not even maybe the more complete team. I think when Clemson is clicking, they should be theoretically able to beat anybody in the country, but we haven't seen that from them yet. And so all of a sudden, to expect Clemson to change its colors this season and perform above expectations against a very good SMU team, a team that has played complete football. Have they been beating world beaters? No, of course not. But they've looked like a good team insofar as they've taken care of business, whether it be at home or on the road. They haven't fallen prey to a trap game. That's something that a lot of their peers cannot say. This is a focused SMU team. This is a gelled SMU team. They can do it through the air. They can do it on the ground. And that defense quietly, guys, has just been one of the more impressive stories for me to follow this year. Now, there is something to be said for not having experience playing in a championship game. And the moment could absolutely be too big for the SMU Mustangs. They're going to Charlotte. They're bringing Peruna. She made the team list for this week. I'm not actually sure. The pony made the team list. Apologies. But I'm gonna trust my gut here, and I'm gonna go with SMU and Moose again. This is the second week in a row that I will look into the camera and apologize for picking against your Clemson Tigers, but you do have to give me credit. I was the only one on the show who was right last week. Let's make it 2 weeks in a row. Pony up.
According to Google AI, Peruna is a male. So take that for what it's worth.
Oh my gosh, Mitch, did you just misgender that pony? Come on, man.
I'm sorry.
We got to be better
than
than
guys.
that. We got to be better. We're gonna get better. Yeah, guys, I really think that one of the under the radar storylines this year in college football is just how impressive Cade Klubnik has been. I talked about Drew Aller kind of turning it around, having a better season than expected for the Big Ten game. That's double as true for Cade Klubnik. He's got over 3,000 yards, 29 touchdowns. He's been fantastic. And for a guy who had faced a lot of criticism, and rightfully so, he hadn't really played or showed us very much. Really impressive to see what he's been able to do. He's going to be a real difference maker in this one. He's got to find a way to kind of put the team on his back and make this whole thing get across the finish line, right? They've been here. They've done that. They know what they're made of. Clemson, you know, this is not going to be an unfamiliar territory for them, right? We've talked about it. They've been there. And I think that they know that. However, this T stands for Texas. And I'm going to stick with the boys from Dallas. I got my SMU shirt back over here. So I'm gonna hang with the SMU shirt as well. Guys, this has been a very impressive SMU team. They've done a really good job start to finish. They obviously dropped the game to BYU early in the season when they switched quarterbacks and, you know, kind of have to float that game. But it was a close loss. They were down there all the way to the wire. You know, we were obviously at that game. And so a very, very valiant effort in their one loss. But, you know, basically since then it's been just a better team week in and week out, continuing to improve, continuing to get better. It's really tough to find the close games. Obviously, the close win over Duke is one that you could point to, but a lot of just dominant performances this season. And you got to give them their credit for that. And I think that they're going to continue. Really like SMU in this game. Really like Brashard Smith. He's got 17 total touchdowns among skill position players. That leads the ACC. And so I'm pumped for SMU, pumped for this moment for the Ponies. I'm going to ride with the Ponies in this one. I apologize again, Moose. I'm sorry, man. I rode with you last week. Y'all let me down. I'm sorry. I can't do it again, man. I like Clemson. Y'all got a spot in my heart, but you know, ultimately, I'm from the DFW Metroplex. I'm going to ride with the boys from the DFW Metroplex.
Garrett repping Dallas County. Let it be on record.
There it is.
Yeah, Guys, I think the lack of explosion from the Clemson offense is what concerns me the most. I've highlighted it a couple times on this show. They were a little bit better last week against South Carolina, but then they couldn't finish off drives and actually translate into points on the scoreboard. Since the Louisville game and against the better defenses on their schedule, they've really struggled to generate explosive plays. They've really struggled to generate any big plays on offense. 3.6 yards per play against Georgia, 4.5 against Louisville, 4.7 against Georgia Tech, 4.9 against Pittsburgh. Like I said, a little better against South Carolina at 6.1, but the athletes of the South Carolina defense gave them a lot of trouble last week. SMU doesn't have the same caliber of athlete as South Carolina on defense, but they do have a very fast, athletic defense. I think it's going to cause more problems for Clemson offensively. Not going to save the graphic. Give me SMU to win the ACC championship in their first year in the league. Big time from the Ponies. Guys, that'll do it for our conference championship preview show. What are y'all's plans for watching this weekend? Y'all got any big plans to fewer games, so less screens to worry about? That's always nice for me.
Yeah, I think I think we're supposed to have some decent weather. I know it's raining on Friday, but it's been a crazy week. So as much as I can, we're gonna have the window open, well, the TV, the laptop going, and I think we're just gonna be writing down storylines as we get through Championship Saturday.
Yeah, I might be having to sit on my dad's back porch for this one and just kind of hanging by the fire pit, maybe, spark up a cigar, get a little glass of whiskey and have a night, just have a nice little night. So, if we're coming in feeling pretty good on the live show, that'll be why, if anyone, I know Mitch, you're around the corner, if you want to come join us, that's perfectly fine. But yeah, no, it'll be a fun weekend. It should be a good time. And obviously love the live show. But that live show on Sunday morning for the reveal, that's going to be an exciting one. Might have to see if we can get a couple guests on for that one, get a nice little party going over here, and we react to just how bad the committee does picking who they should put in the playoff.
Well, we don't have to worry about that till Sunday, thankfully. And you guys are right. The bright side of your team not making it to championship week is you get to just take it all in and enjoy it and be an unbiased appraiser. I'm totally coping right now. It's fine. Garrett did mention programming note before we jump out. There will not be a live show Saturday night. That live show will be Sunday around the time that the college football playoff ranking show kicks up. We'll give you more information about that as the week goes on. Until then, guys, make sure that you're following along on social media at 3TechPod on Instagram and Twitter. Write in 3techpod@gmail.com if you have thoughts on the show, and make sure that you are subscribed on your favorite podcast app of choice and leaving us a review. It really does help us grow the show and get in those algorithms. For Mitch Mason and Garrett Tierney, I'm Trey Reeves. We'll talk to you guys really soon.
Gracious him. How about